Welcome to the session today. This was one that we kind of put together based on need. We're having a couple of these claims come up, and they represent a huge black hole for the organization and for you as a supervisor. So we wanted to go through and kind of discuss what we need to be sure that we're doing when this comes up. And again, we're not talking necessarily about sexual harassment claims. That's a kind of harassment claim. We're talking about all different kinds of claim. The thing that should concern you the most is that you are the manager, so you personally have some responsibility as well as liability. And this is for not only responsibility for yourself individually, certainly you could be sued, but for the property owner, the management company, etc. So I sent you the slides, and again, I apologize for having to send you another email because I forgot to send you the link, for Pete's sake. So you can follow along with the slides. I don't normally like to put a lot of writing on slides, but for some of this stuff, I wanted to do that. I grabbed this off of an attorney's presentation on harassment and discrimination. So harassment and discrimination can likely survive when they involve gender, race, age, religion, or disability. So discrimination, of course, we're familiar with, certainly with fair housing. So there's nothing new there. You're used to dealing with and preventing discrimination, but harassment is, again, not you as a supervisor focusing in on an employee's bad behavior. It is instead a supervisor who is focusing in on negative reaction based on a person's race, gender, sexual orientation. It also can be individual acts of harassment, or it can be just a harassing environment. That's where somebody walks into the room and everybody shuns them or mistreats them, or does the eye roll or the shoulder shrug, and it happens time after time after time. That's a humiliating or offensive environment. So remember, it doesn't have to be something that's blatant, like I squeeze your butt or something like that, or I push you or shove you. This can just be a hostile environment where an individual, or, ladies and gentlemen, a witness to that feels uncomfortable. So you need to know very clearly that it's the person who is being harassed doesn't have to file the claim. It can be someone who witnessed it and said, it makes me uncomfortable to be in this kind of an environment. So you need to have your antenna up at all times. Remember that harassers can be peers or equals. So a maintenance technician can be harassing a leasing person or a maid. Obviously, we're familiar with a subordinate being harassed by a supervisor, but also a subordinate can harass a supervisor and say, I'm gonna cook the books and make your owner really upset if you don't sleep with me, because I don't think you can do the job because you're a female in a male's position. I'm making those up as examples. Man to woman, woman to man, same sex, we're starting to see some of that. And then third party. And really the case here that brought this to light was a third party harassment situation. And it was a resident and a prospect harassing one of our leasing staff. So if you as a manager become aware of one of your staffers being harassed by a resident or a vendor, and you either witness it or somebody comes to you and tells you about it and is willing to put that down in writing, then please, as a manager, take action. We have got to protect our staff from harassment, any kind of harassment by third parties, individuals who are not on the payroll. So just a quick review. In our handbook is about a two-page, maybe page and a half, page and three-quarter anti-harassment policy. I basically took the language right out of it and put it on this slide. We guarantee this to our employees, folks. So unless you want to call to question the entire handbook, we need to treat this seriously. This actual language that comes out of the handbook is part of the handout, ladies and gentlemen, for every single general orientation webinar that I conduct. We spend 30 minutes on anti-harassment and proper ethical conduct. So your staff is informed and is learning about this from the organization. So it is only incumbent upon you to be the organization. You need to enforce the policy and encourage it. Constantly maintain that open environment where, you know, anybody nobody should have to be a victim of that. Anybody, and you can do that in a one-on-one meeting. You can reiterate it in a staff meeting. Just say, always come to me. I am here to support you as an employee at Alpha Barnes. Zero tolerance means none. Just like we have a zero tolerance for drug use in the property, we have a zero tolerance policy for weapons in the workplace. There's no way you can talk yourself out of threatening one of our people with bodily harm. That's zero tolerance against violence. So it's the same thing for harassment. Now, again, we have to determine, is it actually harassment or is it just bad behavior? If a supervisor is yelling at a subordinate because they can't seem to get a work order done without having 3 follow-up calls, and that has happened consecutively for the last 3 days, the yelling is inappropriate, the correction is not. So the yelling is not harassment, it is bad behavior on the part of a supervisor, but it's not illegal harassment, because we're not talking about violating someone's work environment because of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age, disability, veteran, or other legally protected status. We're only yelling because they're not performing their job. Yelling is wrong. Don't get caught into that when you get frustrated. Just calm yourself down, give yourself 5 minutes, and then address it. So if there is a charge or a complaint about harassment, we guarantee, Alpha Barnes says that we will investigate the report. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to call out an attorney for every single one of these claims, but it's like you have to take these seriously. I know you have, whining Walters and complaining Kathys on staff, and these are the people that are always going to bubble up concerns and stuff, and so it's just another complaint or another like, hey, they don't treat me right. But here's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen. We say that we're going to investigate every report of illegal harassment. So even though you have your mind made up based on experience that you've had with this individual, please, it's like the boy who cried wolf, that fairy tale, with a great takeaway. From time to time, the boy is going to see a wolf and actually has a legitimate complaint. As an intake point, do not decide on the spot that that's garbage. Do not decide on the spot that that's nonsense or they're just trying to defend poor performance. Take the information, take it in writing, ask them to identify specifically date and time and who, so because you are going to follow through. Don't take casual claims of harassment without telling the person, you can't just casually claim harassment without me responding with a call to investigation. So sit down with me here right now and let's talk about it. I want to ensure that we are following up on these situations. Not because I doubt you, but because this is who we say we are at this organization. This is who we say we are. Also, we put in the text that if you as an employee bring a claim of harassment, illegal harassment, you're not going to be penalized or retaliated against. And this is where the challenge comes for us, because if we wait to investigate this or don't investigate this, and then we have to write somebody up for bad behavior, it is going to have the appearance of retaliation, even though it's not. So at every point of this discussion, document and respond. Document and respond. So remember that at Alpha Barnes, we do not require a victim to go to the person who's harassing them and saying, hey, I want you to stop. We always give the victim the opportunity to go immediately to the supervisor. Some people are incredibly uncomfortable. In some cases, you and I would not be comfortable going to the person who's harassing us and saying, hey, quit calling me a stupid, I'm going to make this up, a stupid Muslim. Quit calling me that, it offends me. Many of us are not built to do that. So we always at Alpha Barnes, obviously, yes, if somebody is joking around with you and giving you a hard time, but it is against a protected class, or even if it's not, go to them and say, hey, quit making fun of me. I have dyslexia. I have a reading, so I sometimes get these work orders wrong. Okay, you now have a protected person. You need to know about that. So victims do not have to go to the person who's harassing them. Remember again, when I'm talking about harassment here, when I say harassment, I'm talking about illegal harassment. If somebody is being ridden because of their misconduct or inability to perform or bad behavior, that's not illegal harassment. Again, this is so important for you because you are the supervisor to which the person's going to register the complaint. So whether it's about you personally or whether it's about somebody else on your staff, you are in the direct chain of command. The law will always consider you, the supervisor, as responsible for taking the next step. Granted, if this is a serious allegation of illegal harassment, the investigation will likely come out of your hands and go to your supervisor or to HR. But you are the intake. You are the person who recognizes the challenge and bubbles it up to where it needs to go. So this is why you need to understand this and you need to appreciate this in the first place. So this is actually one of the cases that kind of brought this to forelight, to the front of the topics here for webinars. So an employee on staff reported an unrelated claim of third-party harassment right after this leasing professional received a disciplinary warning. and this is the second harassing incident she has reported. The question is this report of a second report of harassment a knee-jerk defensive reaction to her being disciplined, or did it actually occur? There's a couple of challenging sidebars here. In the first place, the first allegation of harassment was not followed up on properly. So there's no record keeping, no investigation was conducted. The manager on the second report of harassment didn't sit down with the individual and say, okay, let's file an incident report. As a matter of fact, I think an incident report form would be an excellent form for you to use for a claim of illegal harassment, simply because it asks you all the right questions. You know, when did it occur? Who did it? What was happening at the time? So that you can protect yourself and the organization. So let's review a couple things here. Obviously, we want to move forward and do the right thing going forward. It doesn't matter what's, you know, water under the bridge. We got to move forward with this and do the right thing. We have to be the company that we say we are. So clearly, I think this is a no-brainer. I mentioned it before. Please don't think that illegal harassment can't happen on your property between your workers or with a third party. I just had a question that says, would Myra be the right person to ask for wording on an incident report? I would include both Myra and your supervisor. I'm not sure how Myra and Kelly have divided those duties, but for the time being, yes, Myra and your supervisor, to be sure you're, again, on an incident report, this should be a factual representation of what the individual, the victim, tells you. Do not editorialize. Do not turn it into your words. I would even use quotation marks to completely and accurately record what the person is telling you. Okay. I would tell you that if you've got somebody who is complaining on your staff that they are being illegally harassed, that you, again, get out the incident report, keep an open mind. This could actually be happening. And if it is a prospect or a resident, wherever possible, separate the two of them. So in other words, the next time that resident comes into the office, you know, allow the person to excuse themselves and have somebody else handle the issue, especially if you're in the middle of the investigation. You do not want to be the employer who forces the complaining victim to have to deal with that person again. Remember that our victims are victims until proven otherwise. Don't jump to conclusions. This may be a hard thing for you to do because the person complaining to you may in fact have some performance issues. That has to be separated. This is why it's so important on your performance issues to be preemptive. We've had sessions before on this about not waiting to give performance reviews or to give performance corrections. We have a disciplinary form that we've perfected that is easy to use, a bunch of check boxes. Don't wait, because if you wait until after someone has alleged harassment, your hands get tied pretty quickly. So please don't jump to conclusions. Be the intake person. Think of yourself as just a funnel. Yes, Tiffany, you do need to check in. Just think of yourself as a funnel for information. Here's another, point. Take people at their word until until we prove otherwise through an investigation. They may be telling you the absolute truth. Even poor performers can be harassed. Separate the two. A complaint, if someone is being harassed, a complaint is tough to make. We teach your new hires that there's all kinds of reasons why people don't make complaints. They think that they're not going to believe. They think that they're going to be blamed. They think that they did something that they shouldn't have done. People are nervous about making a complaint. And you have to keep in mind that the vast majority of people that work with you are good people. If someone's being harassed, if they can't go back into the office to pick up new work orders with someone pushing them around or calling them names, they're not going to want to come in and pick up new work orders, folks. And their work is going to suffer, and they're vulnerable. They're going to start looking for new work, or the unfortunate thing is sometimes they're not going to say anything, and it's going to affect their work. So be sure that the staff knows as a rule that you are there to support each and every one of them in being the best that they can be in their work. And that means you're going to hold them accountable to what they are supposed to do per their job description, but it also means that you've got their back if something's going on that's getting in the way of them doing good work. So yeah, don't shoot the messenger. You've got enough on your plate. I know that each and every one of you on this call, are busy. And the fact that someone brings you another problem, try not to certainly not show that. Don't evidence that with your behavior or deep sighs. Be open and receptive to this. How you respond, quite frankly, could be brought up in a court or an administrative hearing. Well, when I went to the manager and told her that, Jody was making fun of me because I'm 50 years old and they think that I'm too old to climb up and down the stairs and do work orders, so they're making fun of me. Jody kind of acted like this was no big deal. So I really felt like the complaint didn't matter to her. You do not want an employee like that saying that at a settlement table. So remember that how you respond reflects the organization. At every point, take people at their word. And if you get angry, or if there's someone on your staff that you share with, which I think is not a good situation to be in, you might polarize the staff. What that means is you might divide the staff. You might damage morale. You might encourage someone who's really got a real problem to go, whoa, it's clear I don't want to make any more waves here. I better not say anything. So you may not uncover new complaints that are there. This is kind of a no-brainer. Keep it confidential. You obviously don't talk to anybody. Some of you have got staffs that it doesn't really matter what size your staff is. They have got a crazy active grapevine going. And we love it when people, interact with each other, enjoy working as a team, but they can make up their own minds. They can decide to treat somebody like an outcast. So keep everything confidential. Don't buy in. Even if somebody says, hey, manager, Jody told me that she came by and talked to you about the harassment going on. Do not fall into that deep, dark hole of sharing information. That A, could be a total setup, and B, you have no right to share that information. Just say, we really don't need to talk about it. I would urge you to not say anything to anybody else. I don't know what she's told you, but there's an investigation underway. Please don't mention it anymore. Correct them on that. So remember, you can start digging the hole deeper for yourself. This kind of goes along with what we said before. Immediately prevent recurrence if you can. The second bullet there, if it is another staff member and it's something that you can investigate fairly quickly, obviously do none of this without your supervisor's approval and without discussion from Myra or maybe Jeff or Mike. Consider asking them to, putting them on administrative leave. I would do it with pay. I'm a fan of administrative leave and I'm a fan of suspension, but I'm also a fan of that being paid. Just, if it gives you 48 hours to maybe it's a single incident, maybe it's a single egregious incident, like somebody really did grab your butt on staff, then that's something you can investigate pretty quickly. But clearly separate the two of them. Even if you have to get them off site, be sure you have a couple of days to do what you need to do there. Give no allusions to what is going on. Just ask them to leave if that's necessary. If not, then just run interference. And for example, in my example before, if you've got a technician who's harassing a maid, then make sure that that technician, while during investigation, be sure that the technician gives their completed make-ready work orders to you, and the maid comes to you to get them, so that the two of them are not put in a situation where they could end up in the workroom by themselves. That's going to be critical. If you've got two people on staff, it's kind of almost easier with third-party people, but yeah. So interviewing people, you're not going to be if we're down to interviewing people, your supervisor and or HR is always going to be involved. If you have, like on an incident report, it asks you, were there any witnesses? Did anybody else observe this? Write that down in the report. That should be part of your submission, and then turn it over to your supervisor or HR rep. If someone other than the victim, okay, so this goes back to the sexually hostile environment. So say you had your assistant manager has walked in a couple of times on the maintenance technician sexually harassing the maid, and the maid hasn't come to you, but the assistant manager has come to you and said, this is what I saw, it makes me uncomfortable, you need to know. All right, time to get out your incident report. Debrief the assistant manager who witnessed the harassment, the hostile environment, and then give that report to your supervisor and HR, and with them involved, start interviewing the maid and the maintenance technician. There's all kinds of ways that you can get your supervisor involved without the supervisor actually being there. You can certainly Skype them in. Skype is a free service so that you can put them on a conference call so that they can listen in and contribute to the line of questioning that's going to go on. So it's not like a supervisor or an HR person has got to actually be there. Robin, please put in your name. You're a little bit late, babe. Put in your property name too. So again, treat this like an incident and begin to take notes. Again, write it all down. Let everybody know that these will be written down. I would, in some cases, even record the conversations. You certainly can do that. Just make a statement, while you're talking, I will be recording this conversation so that we get the facts all correctly. Now, the challenge with recording is, unless you have the app that converts the recording to a Word doc, which is certainly available, it means that you're probably going to have to transcribe the verbal recording to a written document, or save it somewhere. if there's documents that have to be pulled or reports, or say the HD supply delivery person is harassing the lead tech who is a Hispanic, and the HD supply driver doesn't want the lead tech to sign off on receipt of the delivery because he thinks all Hispanics are idiots. Or here's another one: the HD supply driver doesn't want to have the lead supervisor sign it off because it's a female and he doesn't think females can do the work. So in that case, you know, obviously we're gonna support you as a manager, are going to support your lead tech. But in that case, one of your defense documents is going to be to pull that delivery ticket and who signed off on it. And it'll also assure the date that conversation or that transaction occurred. So just like investigating, you know, an insurance incident or an incident that may rise to the level of the claim, this is going to be, it's going to be essential that you're writing down and gathering the documents. Again, if this is a make-ready situation and you're running interference between the make-ready person and the maid, you're going to have at the ready the dates and the units over which these inappropriate conduct occurred. So even, you know, if you hear that somebody's saying something on Facebook, you know, pull the person in and said, I understand, from someone who's one of your friends. All right, Charles, I don't know that that's you. Again, we just had a manager sign in using a previous manager's name on the computer and just said, hi. I don't know who the manager is unless you tell me who the manager, who you are, first and last name. I will have a recording again, as always, of when computers signed into the webinar so that you can get credit for attending the webinar. But I need you to put in your first and last names. So social media accounts, emails, or texts. I just saw an article where it recommended that you not text important information. It was actually in the Apartment Association of Greater Dallas newsletter regarding interactions with residents, but I can tell you that texts are producible in a court of law in a matter of defense or prosecution. So we don't do a lot of texting anyway, but I thought I would include that. So don't retaliate, obviously, and this again is the challenge to when you've got somebody who's got a performance issue that you have been deferring or deciding not to address or taking your time because it's not fun to do a disciplinary write-up. I get that. I totally get that. But the longer you wait, the potential exists for that person to make some kind of an allegation of harassment, and then that performance review is going to look like it's retaliation. So please don't you retaliate, and don't allow the staff to retaliate. Remember, your staff only knows what they tell each other. And sometimes they tell each other all kinds of stuff that's not even close to the truth. But if you get any sense that the staff is retaliating against the victim, pull them in and just say, hey, I understand that you've been kind of yelling at this person. Please don't do that. That's just bad behavior. It's also outside of our performance standards. You aren't uncourteous or discourteous to your coworkers. That's not appropriate. So any kind of retaliation is against the law. Even changing their work hours, unless you're changing their work hours so that they don't overlap with the person who is harassing them. I would ask, remember, the victim is the victim. So you don't want to make changes to their work schedule. They are the victim. They're not, at this point, they didn't cause the situation. certainly why the investigation's undergoing. I would consider changing work hours or schedules only with the approval of the victim, until you determine through investigation whether this really occurred or it didn't. Please, please just simply follow what our policy says. We're pretty clear about what you should do. We don't mess around too much there. So, you know, every case has got its own little individualities to it, which we will discover in investigation. But if you step outside the policy, obviously every policy has room for exception, and there may be a very good reason to step outside of the policy or the procedure. That's fine, but be sure that your supervisor and even Alpha Barnes leadership knows why you are stepping outside of a policy or a practice, especially as it comes to this topic. Any other operating topic obviously cleared through your supervisor, but because this represents so much risk to us, we want to be sure that we're justifying that. So HR or leadership will make a determination as soon as possible as far as whether harassment did occur or not, and any determination and any response will be governed by leadership. You will not generate that response. You will be part of the response, but the response will be in writing and will come from leadership. Perhaps your supervisor, perhaps HR or leadership direct, HR or Mike or Jeff direct. You'll be copied, so everybody's going to know what's going on of those people involved. Not everybody on staff, but everybody who's involved will know what's going on. So please, please remember that you have got some personal liability here, and take this seriously. This is not hard. Obviously, it's a challenge once there is a claim made. Just remember that treat the claim like an incident report, get the facts and nothing but the facts, separate bad behavior or bad performance from harassment. A lot of people throw that word around, and it really is, you know, there's illegal harassment and not illegal harassment, which we would call bad performance or bad behavior, bad conduct. But remember that you are the supervisor. So in some states in the U.S., California particularly, you are required as a supervisor to undergo separate training for, you know, your liability as a supervisor. So bottom of the line is, you know, a lawsuit can ensue pretty quickly if we don't honor it correctly. It should at least even a you know, minor complaint or a sidebar kind of complaint, just say, whoa, that's a pretty serious complaint, Mary. You know that if you say that, I've got to sit down and ask you some questions. So even a sidebar casual comment needs you to sit down and say, why do you say that? Do you realize how serious a statement that is? Please don't be making that in jest. Tell me what makes you say that. Tell me what occurred, what's going on, and then document that conversation. Because if 3 months later that person comes back and says, you know, it happened again, and I guess I'm fed up with it, you're going to have a first incident report, basically, and record of this person bringing it up in the first place. So that's the end of my session. Again, I hope everyone has put your name in. If you have, that's super. You don't have to do it again. Name your first and last name and your property name. Again, I will compare the chat box with the GoToMeeting reporter, which tells me who signed in when. as we track attendance at webinars. I know some of you take this very seriously and like to have 100% attendance. I appreciate that. Next month, we may go back to our originally scheduled topic, which was going to be exploring managing reputation and what you need to do about bad posts or unfair, unreasonable, anonymous posts, and how we can be more effective at managing the reputation. I know that that happens to us all the time. I'd love to hear from you what you're doing in that case. That's a topic I think that we all need to manage a little bit better. All right. So I am going to let you go and wish you a happy Friday and hope that you don't get too many storms. I know we have Oklahoma properties. I drove through Paul's Valley yesterday, and I'm sure glad I drove through there earlier than later in the day because they got some pretty big storms. So again, thank you. Have a great Friday, and I look forward to seeing you on the next call.